Good morning. How was last night? Did everybody get a little bit of sleep, or are we still working on a little bit of caffeine this morning? As we say, many of the things that took place last night at our fabulous hosted party by MPS were first touch, first handshake, those connections, those engagement. Everything we talk about today basically happened last night in many different aspects. So that will be the question as we get through today's presentation. Right. And you don't know where that's going to lead yet. You don't know how many other opportunities there are there, whether it be career path, whether it be donor relations. I talked to Thomas at the Freddie table. Totally separate conversation last night, because I know Kaylee and I know the organization since they started. But all of a sudden we talked about sports, and we were talking about hockey. And I said I'm staging a Hocktoberfest event where our gay hockey team brings in 4 teams from Canada, and they play in the desert every March, and they're looking for sponsors. Boom. He's like, oh, we're expanding in the United States, all 50 markets. We're looking for LGBTQ gay teams to do something with and support in some way. So all of a sudden, out of a completely innocuous conversation, I'm connecting him with our hockey team to say, hey, maybe they can be part of your thing. Now Freddie's coming to Palm Springs. Freddie comes to Palm Springs. Now CJ says, oh, they're coming to Palm Springs at DAP Health. It's like, oh, how does Freddie work with DAP Health? It's those pieces that you don't realize what it is. If you're really listening and talking to the individual, you get to like a little bit more of just not the box. And we'll give examples of what it is when you talk with donors. That's a whole different thing. So, there we go. So it's beyond the ask. So when I talk about development and fundraising, we can all go out, and I'm sure anybody who's run a list at your agency, or if you've stepped into a role, you have been given a list of donors. And in mine, for our foundation, we have multiple donor aspects that, $100 to $50,000 to millions, we're a different kind of market in that. So they have different people hitting those marks. Well, they're like almost cold calling and going out. Well, I'm saying, well, where do you, and I always talk to them and I say, well, I'm staging an event for World AIDS Day. I have 15 AIDS quilts from the National Archives coming in that are related to, I asked my employees at Eisenhower, submit names. Well, lo and behold, we got all 15 quilts for World AIDS Day, and I told the foundation, it's like, well, why don't, how do you know you've delineated your donor list to LGBTQ, but you don't know their passion. You're selling them on the cancer side or the orthopedic side, but maybe HIV is their passion. Maybe there's a connectivity. Bring them to this event after hours, show them the quilts. I always say, and we all know this in donors, if you can make somebody cry or get emotional or have a moment with whatever that is you're doing, all of a sudden that wall breaks down and the stories start to come. And it's like, now is that donor potentially, eventually going to be part of your organization based on this connectivity? And then, and we're building our, case in point, we're now building our HIV Center of Excellence with our HIV providers. And this person is sponsoring one of our buildings, because they found their niche into something in a market where they weren't sure how it fit. Because they didn't have necessarily anybody that fit into the cancer role specifically, the orthopedic role specifically. They hadn't gone through it yet, but it was enabled to break that down in a very simple way with a handshake, with an invitation, getting to know them a little more outside of just a list and a dollar figure on a page. So that has worked well. And it's like, who has an example of like when a donor has felt part of your story? I'm sure we all have talked to a donor. Yes, Daniel.
So one of the things that we do at EDGE is we facilitate what we call community building tours. And as a part of those tours, like in the program, we have a spot for what we call an emotional hook, where we, share stories from our members with them. And so that is an example of bringing them into, what we do and, getting that buy-in from them, making them feel part of it.
Right, absolutely. Other examples? That's a great example.
We had a donor make a contribution of like it was simple. It was just like some packaged like food we have like this impromptu trading little mini pantry, and the shelves were bare, and they brought it in, and I literally had them put it on the shelves, right? So they're like, and I took a picture of them putting it on the shelves, and so like emailed that with a thank you for it, right? So like just that beginning of kind of like integrating them into it.
And that's a great example. I mean, we have our food bank, we work with when I say partners, we work with our LGBT center, all of our senior centers, they each have food distribution, especially in the COVID years, we had massive, and I worked the line. I said, it's like I'm not in the office all the time, so I worked the line. And one of the individuals was all different ages, a young gentleman who had just lost his job, had no real plan, and was like, it was like so anxious. You could see it in the car, just so completely beside himself that one, he had to fall into this category of I can't sustain, my diet or anything else. And then, as I say, flash forward, we start to get to know each other a little more in the line, and I'm just, checking him in, doing some stuff before he gets to the line to get his food. And then pretty soon, he's like a little more bright. He's like, this is his connectivity moment. And then, flash forward 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and all of a sudden he's like, I just got a job. So I can now give up my space to someone else. And he was so excited that he could go buy, he's gonna get a paycheck, but he can actually go buy, his meal and not have to tap into it. But then he comes back as a volunteer. What a concept. All of a sudden he's like, I saw what you did for me. Now I want to move that forward and take that to the next step. Came back, became a volunteer with the food bank once a week to be able to kind of continue and to give back to what he received. And it's those things that unless you ask that, many donors are looking for that time. They're getting hit up all the time. Restaurants are getting hit up all the time. Businesses are getting hit up all the time. But if there's not a connection there of what that is, and if you're not going in, and I'll use the example of dining out, as you go out to, solicit restaurants, if you're not physically going in to meet the owner, the manager, that, emails, phone, you're just another name on the list. Doesn't mean anything. I always learned, especially being an ambassador when I was running the program, I would help the staff and I'd say, can I be the person who hands the menu? Can I, when the person comes in, and yes, it's not my job, I don't work here, but they'll go to the table, they'll get their drink order, they'll do all this, but instead of having the first handshake be they are at their table, now I have to interrupt them while they're chatting or doing whatever, I've handed them a menu when they walked in the door. And because I've made a connection and said, hi, welcome, and I've handed them a menu, now it's a second handshake. And now they're like, oh, hey, I'm not just a stranger walking to the table. So that made the next conversation easier. It's like, oh, why are we here? And we have a tourist, our event is right during tourist season, so they're like, what? Dining out, what is that? What are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. Some feed into that and others don't, but it's that kind of connectivity where you have to kind of think, what does that look like? Does anyone, yes, Beth, yeah, please.
I was just thinking, one of the things that we've tried to do is, particularly like with restaurant owners and managers, is to treat them as donors and to stay in contact with them throughout the year, so we're not only coming to them to ask for something.
Right.
And one thing that we're doing this year is that we have, a few restaurants that have done it year over year and have been some of our largest supporters and donors. We did like plaques, thank you for your support, and delivered them, and that was just like another touch point as we get ready to start asking for the next year. But also just to kind of like make them feel special and think about them as like.
And that's exactly, I don't think this is working. See if it goes. And that's exactly. So what has happened since that first handshake?
We have gone out almost every night with each other, like after the conference, going to do things, and just been getting like closer. And I feel like that is creating relationships that I'm going to take with me, like when I leave here. These are people that I'm still going to be talking to outside of just dining out for the conference.
Right. And you don't know where that's going to lead yet. You don't know how many other opportunities there are there, whether it be career path, whether it be donor relations. I talked to Thomas at the Freddie table. Totally separate conversation last night, because I know Kaylee and I know the organization since they started. But all of a sudden we talked about sports, and we were talking about hockey. And I said I'm staging a Hocktoberfest event where our gay hockey team brings in 4 teams from Canada, and they play in the desert every March, and they were looking for sponsors. Boom. He's like, oh, we're expanding in the United States, all 50 markets. We're looking for LGBTQ gay teams to do something with and support in some way. So all of a sudden, out of a completely innocuous conversation, I'm connecting him with our hockey team to say, hey, maybe they can be part of your thing. Now Freddie's coming to Palm Springs. Freddie comes to Palm Springs. Now CJ says, oh, they're coming to Palm Springs at DAP Health. It's like, oh, how does Freddie work with DAP Health? It's those pieces that you don't realize what it is. If you're really listening and talking to the individual, you get to like a little bit more of just not the box. And we'll give examples of what it is when you talk with donors. That's a whole different thing. So, there we go. So it's beyond the ask. So when I talk about development and fundraising, we can all go out, and I'm sure anybody who's run a list at your agency, or if you've stepped into a role, you have been given a list of donors. And in mine, for our foundation, we have multiple donor aspects that, $100 to $50,000 to millions, we're a different kind of market in that. So they have different people hitting those marks. Well, they are like almost cold calling and going out. Well, I'm saying, well, and I always talk to them and I say, well, I'm staging an event for World AIDS Day. I have 15 AIDS quilts from the National Archives coming in that are related to, I asked my employees at Eisenhower, submit names. Well, lo and behold, we got all 15 quilts for World AIDS Day, and I told the foundation, it's like, well, why don't, how do you know you've delineated your donor list to LGBTQ, but you don't know their passion. You're selling them on the cancer side or the orthopedic side, but maybe HIV is their passion. Maybe there's a connectivity. Bring them to this event after hours, show them the quilts. I always say, and we all know this in donors, if you can make somebody cry or get emotional or have a moment with whatever that is you're doing, all of a sudden that wall breaks down and the stories start to come. And it's like, now is that donor potentially, eventually going to be part of your organization based on this connectivity? And then, and we're building our, case in point, we're now building our HIV Center of Excellence with our HIV providers. And this person is sponsoring one of our buildings, because they found their niche into something in a market where they weren't sure how it fit. Because they didn't have necessarily anybody that fit into the cancer role specifically, the orthopedic role specifically. They hadn't gone through it yet, but it was enabled to break that down in a very simple way with a handshake, with an invitation, getting to know them a little more outside of just a list and a dollar figure on a page. So that has worked well. And it's like, who has an example of like when a donor has felt part of your story? I mean, I'm sure we all have talked to a donor. Yes, Daniel.
So one of the things that we do at ADGE is we facilitate what we call community building tours. And as a part of those tours, like in the program, we have a spot for what we call an emotional hook, where we, share stories from our members with them. And so that is an example of bringing them into, what we do and, getting that buy-in from them and making them feel part of it.
Right, absolutely. Other examples? That's a great example.
We had a donor make a contribution of it was simple. It was just like some packaged food we have this impromptu trading little mini pantry, and the shelves were bare and they brought it in and I literally had them put it on the shelves, right? So they're and I took a picture of them putting it on the shelves, and so emailed that with a thank you for it, right? So just that beginning of kind of integrating them into it.
And that's a great example. I mean, we have our food bank, we work with when I say partners, we work with our LGBT center, all of our senior centers, they each have food distribution, especially in the COVID years, we had massive, and I worked the line. I said, it's I'm not in the office all the time, so I worked the line. And one of the individuals was all different ages, a young gentleman who had just lost his job, had no real plan, and it was so anxious. You could see it in the car, just so completely beside himself that one, he had to fall into this category of I can't sustain, my diet or anything else. And then, as I say, flash forward, we start to get to know each other a little more in the line, and I'm just, checking him in, doing some stuff before he gets to the line to get his food. And then pretty soon, you know, he's like a little more bright. He's like, this is his connectivity moment. And then, you know, flash forward 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and all of a sudden he's like, I just got a job. So I can now give up my space to someone else. And he was so excited that he could go buy, you know, he's going to get a paycheck, but he can actually go buy, you know, his meal and not have to tap into it. But then he comes back as a volunteer. What a concept. You know, all of a sudden he's like, I saw what you did for me. Now I want to move that forward and take that to the next step. Came back, became a volunteer with the food bank once a week to be able to kind of continue and to give back to what he received. And it's those things that unless you ask that, many donors are looking for that time. You know, they're getting hit up all the time. Restaurants are getting hit up all the time. Businesses are getting hit up all the time. But if there's not a connection there of what that is, and if you're not going in, and I'll use the example of dining out, you know, as you go out to, you know, solicit restaurants, if you're not physically going in to meet the owner, the manager, that, emails, phone, you're just another name on the list. Doesn't mean anything. I always learned, especially being an ambassador when I was running the program, I would help the staff and I'd say, can I be the person who hands the menu? Can I, when the person comes in, and yes, it's not my job, I don't work here, but they'll go to the table, they'll get their drink order, they'll do all this, but instead of having the first handshake be they are at their table, now I have to interrupt them while they're chatting or doing whatever, I've handed them a menu when they walked in the door. And because I've made a connection and said, hi, welcome, and I've handed them a menu, now it's a second handshake. And now they're like, oh, hey, I'm not just a stranger walking to the table. So that made the next conversation easier. It's like, oh, why are we here? And we have a tourist, you know, our event is right during tourist season, so they're like, what? Dining out, what is that? What are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. You know, some feed into that and others don't, but it's that kind of connectivity where you have to kind of think, what does that look like? Does anyone, yes, Beth, please.
I was just thinking, one of the things that we've tried to do is, particularly like with restaurant owners and managers, is to treat them as donors and to stay in contact with them throughout the year, so we're not only coming to them to ask for something.
Right.
And one thing that we're doing this year is that we have, you know, a few restaurants that have done it year over year and have been some of our largest supporters and donors. We did like plaques, you know, thank you for your support, and delivered them, and just like that was just like another touch point as we get ready to start asking for the next year. But also just to kind of like make them feel special and think about them as like donors, you know, what
Right.
do we do to make them feel connected to us?
That's exactly right. And that is a key point. It's like, you know, these, well, especially dining out, if we use that example, the restaurateurs are looking for a connection. Some will get on board because they have a personal connection, they've been involved. Beth would know this from many of our restaurants that have been involved since the very beginning. And then others that are new. And they're like, what is this? I'm getting hit up all the time. You want me to give you 35%? What? You know, that kind of thing. But once you've shown up, and you haven't just come by to get the money, you haven't come by just to hand them the thing, you've connected throughout the year. You've actually gone in, and yes, you go in to make the introduction, but you go in periodically and have a drink, have a Coke, have a snack. It doesn't cost a whole lot, but it's like that money well spent because you're making the interaction with that business owner so that they, when they see you again and you come back to make the ask, or you come back to say, hey, we have this party, would you mind catering or doing any aspect of that throughout the year? Those should be your caterers too. I mean, if they do delivery, they do catering, whatever that might look like, that's where you tie in outside of the event model itself. And so when I do, you know, I have my partners, I look at, I mean, they're hitting us up because we sponsor events, we don't stage events. So on my side, you know, I sponsor 25,000, 50,000, you know, whatever that dollar figure is for different things. And so what they're doing is I'm like, I think I'm the donor that is, they're hitting me up constantly. And I said, well, great, but what can we do throughout the year? I don't want just the rubber chicken dinner at the gala, you know, 3 nights and a week or a month kind of, you know, advertising. I want to know, what can I do with your organization 364 other days of the year? You know,
I love that. On those lines, what we do as well, like we've leftover shirts from AIDS Walk or Pride. Bring a few into the restaurant. They love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, here, you guys want some shirts? You want some shirts for your staff? Here you go. They're like, oh yeah, cool. You know, like, yep. And now they're like, hey, did you guys get shirts this year? Like, they're so into it. And then the other piece, I think, and it's like cost us nothing. These are leftover shirts. They're gonna sit in inventory, like.
Right.
But they feel thought of, right? And then the other piece we do is we're a pharmaceutical capital of the world, New Jersey. I mean, we have so many pharmaceutical companies, and they all want to come in and do a presentation and buy us lunch. We will only let them in if they'll buy lunch from a Dining Out for Life restaurant. So we use their money to give the business to the business, and they love it because they're like, oh yeah, of course we'll sign up. You cater with us all year long, right? It costs me nothing. The pharmaceutical company's paying for it.
Right.
But I make it very clear, so it's generally we'll place the order, and we'll have them just call in the credit card. So that connection is with us, not necessarily with someone else, and they know it's us.
Well, right, and there's that connection. And again, it's not transactional, it's transformational. You're talking building this relationship, again, that is 365 days a year in whatever capacity. I have certain organizations that are selling us hospice or selling a lot of stuff, which I can and can't do to a level, but I can bring a lecture to them. I can bring a speaker to their organization and their patient load to be able to just educate them. I can't have them market, we're a nonprofit hospital, so there's so many things we can't do on site, but at the same time, I can go external and bring that education to the market. And so that helps create, not only do I meet the executive director, I meet some of their donors. Their donors are then, I'll have another example later, but donors are calling me directly with personal medical questions because I'm not a physician, I'm not an RN, whatever, but within our network, I am that conduit to which I will immediately get them to Joanne, I'll get them to Beth, I'll get them to somewhere. I work closely with DAP Health. So if we don't cover, I just say, do you have any underlying medical conditions that you wish to share? And then from that, I say, can you access our system, access another system, IEHP, there's 4 other medical, so it's like, who can we get you into? My job is to get them into patient care. I don't care who takes that piece of it, I just need to get them into patient care, and as quickly as possible in most cases. So is that, we're talking about a community engagement, and that's what everyone in this room, everyone here at this conference really is doing in whatever regard. It's all about two-way communication, which we were just giving examples of in chatting. Finding out, listening, co-creating, finding things that matter to them, not outside of the event, outside of other things you're doing within the organization with them, but what is it they may want? And asking them, it's like, how can we help you? In some cases, we have restaurateurs that say, oh, I have 3 of my staff members, they're new to the market, blah, blah, blah. They don't have medical, they don't have this, they don't fit into Medicare. All these different criteria. How can I keep them healthy so that they can continue to work for me and I don't have to worry about that? Or they have children, all those kind of dynamics. And that's a piece that all of a sudden you've built that next connection. You've built that second, third, fourth handshake to say, oh, let me get back to you. Danielle is saying, oh, let me get you into care. We have this, and again, if it's not yours, it's someone else, but it allows you to get in there. What would you say is what is your most surprising, your community has engaged back with you? Do you have that connector where someone has come back and said, let's do this, and it has spawned into something else for your organization? Yes, Roy.
So I started at my organization in February, and one of the first kind of tasks that came with it was that because of COVID, because of our merger together, we had pulled away from a lot of our engagement, in the gay bars and doing, condoms, testings and things, and left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And so I we had 2 of the bars that were Buffalo restaurants as just kind of we want to do something with them, and we're doing this thing anyway, so we'll kind of make it work. And so I went and met with every bar owner and let them tell me their thoughts about it, and I was I agree with you, and my job here now is to hear you fix it, and I don't want you to be a double restaurant because you're not a restaurant. It's not a thing. I want to do something with you in and so getting the feedback from all of them. We created this whole summer that we just launched in July. That was in there we became a bar crawl, and we became all these different things that they all have a plan, and it's just going to change what our name looks like when you're walking through them now.
Right, and that's a great example because what started off with one pitch may or may not have worked for them. It doesn't mean that you walk out the door and say, I can't work with this restaurant, or I can't work with this business. Because if you took a time to, like you did, ask the question, find out a little bit more about them, there may be something else that they're involved with that your agency could be involved with that then makes this connectivity. You know, some of it, we all assume that some of these things we go in and it's like a yes, no. Well, there's so many other dynamics to that you don't even know about until you share the story or ask the story or say, why are they involved? You know, it's like, oh, I noticed that you're heavily involved with the animal shelter. What does that mean to you? Well, maybe they needed, you know, it's like, how can you then tie into that audience? How can we have a testing unit there for these people that are coming in to get, you know, you never say, when I look at testing, it's like, where can I physically get our testing in our mobile clinic out into the community where it's needed, unhoused, whatever, every aspect of it, you know, but yet, unless you ask the question, you don't know that that's an opportunity. And it steps out of the normal bounds that you went into originally, but you've asked that question and you started that story. Yeah. Any other example of how you maybe one of your community members have engaged back with your agency that wasn't anticipated? While you're thinking, so I'll focus on our Pride events. So, you know, if you come to Palm Springs anytime, well, this year, Halloween is on a Friday. It's gonna be crazy 10 days. Halloween kicks off, it's Leather Pride weekend, literally that weekend. Then the following weekend's our Gay Pride weekend. We're always the last of the season for nationally. So it's 10 days of pure, every aspect of anything you want to do in the LGBT kind of community and fun and games and all kinds of different stuff. So my job and we had is the Palm Springs Leather or the Desert, a very specific organization dealing with the leather community, wanted to have us as a sponsor. And I said, well, I can't sponsor your parties for sex. And I can't sponsor your party for alcohol, because we can't do either of those in a sense of our charter. However, I said, can I do a lecture series? Can I bring in a provider, which I know, my providers. By asking my providers, I know some of their background. Social media, I know their background. Online, some of them I know their background. You know, so you know where they've been and they would be comfortable talking in this audience. So they show up, my physicians. So now we do basically leather and fetish talk. We do harm reduction panel, which I'm bringing in LCSW, behavioral health, our addiction medicine specialist, a current client who's currently in addiction and not necessarily looking for a result, and then someone who has found that path and is trying to. So it's a panel discussion, a very open, frank conversation with 50 people in the room to ask anything they want to ask, and you never know what that's going to do to change the dynamic. You know, so now when I'm talking with them, it's like now my organization says we can sponsor you throughout the year for a multitude of other things that make sense business-wise for both of us, to give them the credit, you know, the kind of credentialing that they need for certain things, to give them the expertise, to give me an inroad to that audience, which I normally wouldn't have, or I cannot get in, save my life. We have a very high swinger market in our community. Clothing optional men, everybody knows about Palm Springs and the gay community, but we equally have the other side of the spectrum, and has been there probably before all the gay community, to be honest. And they cross-pollinate in many ways, the leather community and that. Can I get in to actually do a lecture with them? No. You know, even though that would probably be, if they're in that community as well, that'd probably be the best scenario to talk about sexual health and safeguards and PrEP and all this stuff. But they can't get in. And I know part of the reason is, I just happen to know that there may be some of my colleagues that are in that arena. And they don't want to have me know that they're in that arena, if that's like. So there's those hurdles that it's like, well, can I provide you the information to the leather community to take it to their meeting? So you find these inroads about how you can cross-pollinate and partner. And that's the key. If you don't ask and you don't do this, so then when they need something, they come back to me without any, we meet quarterly to say, what can we do? How do we move this forward as a relationship model? What else we got? And this is the other thing, internal collaboration. Depending on the size, we have small organizations within Amplify. We have large organizations that have siloed kind of approach, I will say, and that's no disrespect to my colleagues. We're a very large organization with very siloed type departmental structure in some ways. Cancer is very cancer, orthopedic, they each have different governing bodies that kind of manage their day. My job, and it always has been when I was at Lexus, when I was at different McDonald's, different corporate entities, my job was always to try to find that bridge, to walk into someone's office as VP and say, how can I help you and your team? And they say, well, your team sucks. I mean, literally one of my VPs, said, we don't use you, meaning we send all of our money, we pay an outside consultant as opposed to a creative team of 25 people. He goes, because your team typically never hears us. Well, what does that mean? I'm new to the job and I play that ignorant really well. I said, well, tell me what you need. Tell me, I said, give me 90 days and let me see how I can help you. And if I suck, then I'll be part of that team. And if I don't, all of a sudden they're putting projects through us. So we're keeping the money in-house. We broke down a silo, keeping some of that money in-house, we're paying consultants, we already have a team we're paying. That's one example early on, but the whole idea is it's explaining what you do within your role, because I can guarantee you the event person is no different than the development person on the other end. Do they see you each completely? Maybe not. Do they understand how, as an event person, you're reaching out and meeting someone at a tabletop somewhere, at a screening event, at whatever, and how that person, you don't know, maybe they're a donor. Maybe there's someone who needs cancer services. Maybe there's somebody who, as a business owner, you don't even know because you haven't asked the question, you haven't delved into their story. And I've had great success with, no arrogance, but I've had great success of building some of that. And my foundation president always says, I don't make any money. Like our foundation people in development, you hit goals and you have certain things and criteria and there's bonus structure. That's not in my job. Mine's just straight salary. And my job is just to get people into care. And so I meet this person at a tabletop who is talking about, she's a grandmother and is bringing in her trans granddaughter from a southern market. She wants them to be safe. They're going to come live with her. How do we access care? So we get them into the care stream. But lo and behold, I didn't ask. I didn't care. This person is a major donor. And not just a donor, but a major donor, like a building name kind of donor. And to me, and I always would tell them, it's like, that doesn't not matter to me, but I treat everybody parallel. And it's like, it's great that you have the money and we're really appreciative, but let's talk about the care stream you need. That's my focus. But now they're a friend. Now they're on my Facebook. Now they're supporting me for my personal efforts for cycling and other stuff that I do within our community. That wasn't my intent, but those are the things that come out of handshakes and storytelling and getting to know the other person across from you and not just looking at it as a line item and that kind of thing. We also know it's like, like depending on if you're reaching out to organizations for sponsorship and different things, what do they need for their grants? Do you know? If they have a grant and they say, oh, we need a community partner to do some testing. Great. Well, what are those grant criteria, those accreditation pieces, those line items that may just be one of 10 bullets, but what is it you can do, and ask that question. Is there anything within your structure that we can help you with and partner with you to help do those check marks? Because that's a piece that people forget about. I mean, I ask my orthopedic side all the time, it's like, well, every year, I know what to do. I have to deliver X amount of lectures, X amount of things per their physician requirement, all the stuff with their contract base, and I know the basics. But this year I said, you haven't told me anything, and I said, it's already going to be fourth quarter, and I know historically you need to have 2 lectures because it's part of your contract, and it's part of your grant process. And they said, oh my God. They hadn't equated like, oh, the time's just going by, it's summer. I was like, let's book it, let's get your credit, because if you don't get your credit, now you've unfulfilled your grant request and your contract. So somewhere along the way, if you know some of those little details, it can help pay off later on. of how they might be able to be involved. And you never know until they, you ask that question, and they may say, oh, I have this, and it's not really your organization. However, who do you partner with? That is another organization that you're in partnership with that may be able to bring them that needed piece that they haven't been able to go out in the community and find yet. So now you have 2 to 3 different things and different organizations working together with you as the main component to bring it together. So when they view your organization, they're saying, oh, Aliveness Project did this for us. Great. Those are the kind of things when I say, get to know your audience and delve a little deeper. And that's hard. We're all struggling with time management, and you have short staffs, and you have a multitude of projects on your list. We were just talking about that at dinner last night. And you just have to kind of take a few minutes to figure out what that might look like. And again, it goes exactly about retention through engagement. It's all about cross-departmental. That's the example I just gave. It's all about how you interact with other departments within your organization. If you really have a meeting where you understand what that is, how does that work? I have, totally behind the scenes, I had found out one day, it's been 10 years now, but I found out one day that my nursing directors all had this secret meeting that they all got together to be able to talk about, like in a private room and this whole thing, once a month to talk about all the crap. The things that no one talks about or you can't talk about in department meetings and all this stuff. But they were sharing because they're coworkers and they're the same level. And they invited me in one day and I said, well, great, how can marketing, how can my event team help you mitigate some of the frustration you have, your education of your nurses? Like, well, we have our nurses and they don't understand anything about gender affirming. They don't know anything about LGBTQ. You never know. They're coming out of school, they've never had that, they've never, in theory, never met somebody who had HIV, met somebody who, has an STI, any of these aspects, because they haven't got that part of their career yet. So they were all of a sudden throwing me a bunch of ideas to say, hey, can you just come in and talk to this special group? Yeah, happy to. Bring in a resident, bring in someone else. Then I'm tying in my resident to say, you're a 3rd-year resident, I know you're planning on this career path, would you come in and kind of just have a Q&A with them to answer some questions? And all of a sudden it helped educate this random group, which I didn't know about until someone invited me in, because they said, oh, this would be kind of fun. Yes?
I have a question, just in reference to staff engagement,
Yeah.
and it may be open for the entire group. It's
Yeah.
like, what have you seen as being successful in having an employee be more engaged in whatever we do activity-wise?
The staff engaged in your activities? Yeah. Anyone else? How do you engage your staff? Yeah, Beth.
Well, when it comes to recruiting volunteer ambassadors, we go to our employees and we talked to management several years back into giving volunteer hours.
Yep.
So that they could get 4 hours per year. Used to be 8, now we have more employees, so now it's come down to 4. But 4 hours a year for working one of several big events, so that I could have them cover a lunch or a dinner shift for Dining Out for Life, and then help us out at our gala or whatever. And also within our company, I work for 2 departments now. I work for volunteer services and resource. We just changed our name to philanthropy. So I have my foot in both doors, and that's really important because our volunteers, most of them contribute to our bottom line.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
Any other examples
We
from
pay
organizations? Yeah, go. Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things that we do at the LGBT Life Center is every so often we'll have bagels with the boss, and our CEO Stacy will break up all the departments in little groups of people from all the departments. There were maybe 8 people in them, and each morning they'll have their own group that gets to sit with Stacy and literally talk about anything with her, whether it's something that's in her personal life altogether, or it's something with the center, like they have an idea, or there's issues with the center, and it's not an area where there's no pushback from Stacy on any of the things. She's just there to hear what it is, and from that they compile like the things that were talked about throughout all of the groups, and we'll send out a message of those are the things that the center works on.
I love that.
Yeah.
You could be having bagels, honey, with everybody.
Yeah, offering food. Well, yeah, food from one of your restaurants, bringing in bagels, bringing in different things to engage. But part of the engagement piece, if I heard that correctly, so part of this is like, this slide is meant to be also about retention. So, if you're, depending what level, and I don't know everybody's level, I was trying to look, we have people in the room for event side, we have development, we have potential CEO, ED level. So the thing is, how do you engage and how do you retain individuals in each of those areas? From the event side, we all know, been there, that, an event person comes in, you're throwing every possible thing at them, 15 different things to get done in a short time, they're doing all this stuff, and then, maybe you'll keep them for 12, 18 months or whatever, and they're like, oh, I could do something else, and, and where I see that many times management, I wouldn't say the word fail, but they fail to realize, is that employee, if you had taken the time to ask the question, or to bring them into the question, what you just said, bring them into kind of a roundtable discussion of, like you were talking about, mission, to tell their story, that's a potential retention piece. Well, that event person, maybe that's not that's their skill set, they did it as their job, but maybe their real point of interest is development. Maybe their point of interest is case management. We have individuals in the room that started in case management are now executives. We have people who started in as a patient and then became, especially at DAP, became a nurse, and then as a very vocal person in our community on HIV, because they came in to get services, but then they took that to the next level because they didn't realize they could. And you gave them the opportunity to kind of maybe step out of their bounds, or to maybe invite them into a meeting or some kind of thing where it gave them a little bit of a little carrot to say, if you really realize who the person is you've hired, because you spent time, you spent months getting them onboarded, you spent money getting them onboarded. And so for someone to leave the organization to 6 to 12 months, that's a loss. The ROI on that is just down. And so all of the organizations, as we've gone through, budget cuts, we've gone through grant funding, different things, how can you work some of those individuals into other areas? Or to the point of Beth said, keep them involved as volunteers. They still love the organization. You may not be able to keep them employed in that role, but it doesn't mean they just cut ties.
Yeah.
Maybe they can be a volunteer. Beth's a good example, because I worked with Beth for good luck, many years. But she's been in, out, depending on departmental shifts, and they bring her back, and they do something else and bring her back. You just never know. But if you burn those bridges and you don't understand what that individual's maybe wanting in their career, you won't know how to foster that and to engage with it and to kind of keep it within your network. Because you never know as well when that person excels and goes on to their stardom in whatever their career is. If they had this wonderful opportunity with your organization, now they're a volunteer, now they're a donor. And in my market, I have from one of Stacy's LGBT Center, donor, was a big donor for them and probably still is, but now lives in Palm Springs, and she connected me and now is a donor for us and a volunteer for us and someone that became a friend.
We had one of our employees who recently left, went to work for a major hospital system, and now they sponsor all our events.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and they're one of our best volunteers, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Right? They come to everything, they volunteer. So I think, and I also think, you have to think about, what are things as an organization you can put in place for your staff? Because it's nice to say thank you, but how do you bring that into policy? How do you, what does that look like? We give our staff a lot. We have a line at the door of people waiting to work at Edge, but we have a very robust benefit package.
Yeah.
And so we spent time over the years intentionally building this robust, not all at once, but adding on new features every year.
Yeah.
We have bereavement days if you lose a pet. You get paid time off on your birthday that doesn't come out of your PTO. That's your gift. I'm not buying you pizza, bagels, or making you a cake. But you get 8 hours, 9 hours paid off, right? So we have a 4-day work week. We, pay 100% of health benefits paid. Employee makes 0 contributions. All of building a benefits package that we are proud of to offer our employees has gone so far in retention and
Yep.
keeping people in our organization.
Right.
When I started 6 years ago at Edge, our turnover wasn't something I was proud of. We had employees that averaged at 1.5 or 2 years, especially in case management, right? And one of the things I came in and did was I run a member advisory committee where I meet every 6 weeks with a whole bunch of our like key members that are the most, outspoken, best advocates, and I asked them, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And they were hating the turnover. I don't want a new case manager every 18 months.
Yeah.
So employee retention became like a huge goal coming out of the voices of the people we serve, and we just consistently add something every single time. And at this point, like, I think it's hard for people to leave, because where am I going to go to get a 4-day work week and free health insurance and all of the millions of other things that we get.
Right,
So
and it may not be the highest salary they could get.
it is
Right.
not the highest salary.
But they may not be necessarily looking for the highest salary. I
Right.
mean, it sounds
It's a fair
good.
salary. It's a great salary.
It's a great salary, but they may be thinking, oh, I got those other benefits, I got other things that might play into the happiness of their day-to-day life and their career.
Yeah.
I mean, in case in point, when I was at DAP, we have many volunteers that I just saw them as volunteers, not just, but they would be volunteers for dining out, and that's how I would know them. Unbeknownst to me, they're also catering, they're doing some other things, they're volunteering everywhere, and it's like, wow, how do you do that? Well, they did well in whatever their career was. They retired early. One evening, I'm helping take stuff out to his car, and I'm laughing because I always see them as just kind of at parties with us, and not just high end, but just the most nice, gracious people. And he's got his Ferrari, and I'm loading stuff into his Ferrari, and I'm like, it kind of just took me off guard a little bit of like, because I had it in my mind that, I don't know, retired senior person in the valley, but unbeknownst to me, he's a huge donor in all these other areas for other organizations, and he does this out of the kindness and the love of his heart, because it keeps him active and it keeps him passionate about what that is. And you never know where some of these individuals will come back and volunteer. We have organizations that, you've had to cut staff because of grants and other things going on. But at the same time, you have people who may be in market that are retired or want to do stuff, or maybe they still want to do something but volunteer to help do your database or do some other aspect. And until you kind of scope out what that is, you don't want to lose them. But it's like those are resources. And for us, like within our nursing group, we try to do events that we don't, we're not all LGBT. Our CEO is a gay man, ex-priest. I mean, it's like there's many dynamics, which I love, because I can be whoever I am. I can be completely transparent. I can be 32-year-old survivor, HIV, all different aspects. They see me as my cyclist. They see me fundraising. They see me at pool party. It's just any aspect. And it's all good because they know what to expect. And they also know that, I go to a pool party in Palm Springs, which is in our weather. I'm constantly, if they know I work for Eisenhower, I'm constantly, somewhere along the way, even this week while I'm here, somebody's asking questions about medical. Somebody's asking questions about, how do I access blah, blah, blah. And they're sharing in the pool while we're having drinks, about a medical thing that they need help with. So I look at everything like, I'm always 24/7 kind of working, but I also, that's my passion, and I'm happy to do that, and we keep everything, and that's the other piece. We keep, if your donor knows, and I have to say this, if they know that you're, as I say, in a cone of silence, you are transparent, but you're also confident and confidential with anything they talk about, those are things they may not want others to know. There may be very specific things. So individuals who, I've had business partners who, would share things out of their side of the house that they shouldn't have, and those were deal breakers. And it's like, well, now, and they ask, well, why don't you use our company? I say, because you could not be trusted. And that's like, I'm very clear about that. I expect transparency, but I also expect confidentiality, and we all work in medical in some aspect, probably. So we have to be thinking about that at the same time. And if they're opening up to you, that's to you. And then you have to ask them the question, how can I share this best with my organization? Do you give me permission to elevate it, to do something else. I just have to say that because you don't want it to come back and bite you on something that's like, oh, you know, somebody said share this. That's not the intent. Yeah, so it's like we have our HIV and Aging Conference. We have an organization, HIV and Aging project locally, used to be on the board of. Education for those long-term survivors, different things. But so they do a conference every year, and they target it, and they wanted to sponsor. So I said, okay, we'll sponsor, we'll participate. Next thing you know, we're having it on our campus. Next thing you know, we're bringing in a speaker. Next thing you know, it's all these different pieces as partnership. And it's like, well, how else can we reach our audience base? How can we reach? So now, you know, because of dining out and because, you know, Kaylee with Freddie, I said, oh, you know, we're a direct link and a direct flight to Calgary, to Montreal, to our Canadian market and our providers. And we do provider symposia. So I said, you know, literally I just followed up again here with Kaylee and I said, hey, can I just send you our flyer? Would you blast it out to your email database that he has in Canada, which I don't really have access to? He's like, absolutely. You know, so now my event, which for me was US based in the sense of just my list management, now has taken a different thing from a very personal exposure from an individual who doesn't have a hesitation. It's like, no, I'll send it out to my colleagues. You know, and then he makes a personal pitch to say, I will be potentially attending, join me. Those are all the pieces that when I say, you know, cross-pollinate, you know, get, you know, to help the reach, help donor retention, help staff, those are the things, you just don't know who that next person is that's going to be able to assist you, to help you, to kind of make that work. So that's another example of that. Anybody have that where you've met, even here, or other conferences or other things where you've met someone and maybe the first conversation was one direction and now it's completely taken another as part of your organization?
I have an example.
Yeah.
I was out at an event, it was like a film screening, right? It was Iron Venus. Have you seen it on Netflix?
I'm Venus,
No?
yeah.
So I was at a film screening, randomly chatting with people. I started chatting with this other trans woman, and we're like connecting like on our transness, right? And fast forward, I invite her to the center. She meets with Joanne, Ciara, and I. You know, we can like kind of show her around. Turns out she is like looking to put together a documentary and like wants to highlight like pride centers. Actually, to backtrack a little, we had been exploring creating a video for our gala that we have coming up and whatnot. Super freaking expensive. So anyway, she's looking to create this documentary and highlight centers, and now she's coming in like a week.
Oh God! Oh yeah,
We have
10
the whole
days.
film crew coming to the center in a week to help us create a video for free through one conversation. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
And this is like a very, very professional,
Yes,
full-on production company.
Yes.
It's crazy, and this is all just because Daniela and her
Right?
started this chat, and she was interested.
Right, and another piece.
No, like-
Yeah, that's a great example. And it's a great success piece of that. Another
First we
piece
thought
of
she was
that.
crazy and full of shit, but.
Yeah, we weren't sure. We kept saying to each other, "Is the production company real?" Until
Yeah,
we met
yeah,
them.
But when she came on Zoom with her little dog, I was like, oh no.
She's petting it like.
But it's funny, so I've taken it the other direction, is that we, for our cycling, so I do active transportation for our city, and we plan our routes and safe and all these different things, so I've been doing it forever. And there was like this, the city comes back and says, oh, we don't have the funding to have a video, to do a new video, to do these new things or whatever. I said, great, we'll handle. And then my team, my group of friends are like, we don't have the money to do that. What are you talking about? Let's go to the high school. The high school right there in our city has an audiovisual department. They have these young kids that are social media driven. They're podcasts, they're doing all this stuff, and they need a project. So we met with the school, we met with the principal and the person running the class and said, wouldn't this be a project for you? If we gave you the tools and we gave you the audience and we gave you all this, would you treat this as an educational project for one of your quarters where they do all the work, they bring in the cameras, they get to edit, they get to do all of that for free, because now it's a resume builder, now they can use it on their podcast, now they can use it in any aspect of their career building that they want. We get it for free, the city's like, well, you're doing this, what about this? You know, had all these parameters, and I said, we're an outside organization. If you choose to use it, great. We're going to be professional. We're working with children. We're working with youth. We're working with adults. It's all going to be great. Doesn't cost you a dime. If you choose to use it, great. But we're going to blast it out. We're going to blast it out to our network, our community, and get the visibility. So that'll be coming in. They're shooting like in the next couple weeks. You know, it's hotter than heck right now in Palm Springs, so they're like, let's not go outside on bikes at the moment. You know, it's 120. But you know, it's those things that there may be in your market. You know, as I said, those are taps that it's like, there is a group, there is someone, even our local community college has different groups. Their LGBT group and the diversity group, whatever they're now named, within some of our colleges, you know, they have people who want to engage with this type of audience. So bring that to the front. Say, hey, here's 3 different concepts. Could we get you to support? You know, and that's where I say it's like the community engagement. You know, part of it is like knowing when you're doing these things is to categorize it, is to do some data on it. Not everything is going to be a few ROI that I sold this, got this, and we hit X revenue. ROI in my book, because I don't have any of those on mine. Mine is just community engagement. I say just, and I hate that 4-letter word. My boss would say that, and I said no. I go, for me, ROI is I saw 5,000 people at Pride. I gave out X amount of incentives. Yes, some of that is just trick or treat at a table. We know that, you know. But I had conversations, and I'm tracking that. And I go, I had 4 trans families that were looking for help and care. I had others that were looking for behavioral health and how to get help for a friend or family member. I had others that had a crappy experience within our hospital. Great. Let me figure out how to get that to our supply chain to understand how we can do better. You know, so, and when they're leaving my table, they're not pissed off. They came pissed off, and I was that person they owe me all of that. We're for the table, we're the pro and the con. We're the one that they come to and, you know, share everything. But at the end of the conversation, if you can turn that frown and that whatever into a positive, next thing you know, you can pass that along. Someone calls them. All they needed was a phone call. All they needed was someone to actually hear them. And then just say, great, how can we assist? You know, sometimes that may work, sometimes that may not, but you just never know. But it's that continuous kind of, when you're looking at outcomes, it's not always just how much did we make, you know, it's that those other pieces that but you set that up at the beginning so your team knows here's how we're kind of laying this out. You know, and it's like, the why now? We all know this. You know, the dynamic in our world, the dynamic, as we well know, I don't talk politics, but there's a lot of just crap. There's a lot of things that are coming, a lot of things that are here, changing by the day, a lot of smoke and mirror. It's all about getting people uprising and focused on this thing over here while 10 other things are happening over here, you know. And we get focused on social media on things that are just like, oh my God, and we get focused on that. And it's like we're not paying attention to some of the other things they're doing behind the scenes. And that's every administration, that's every city. You know, you just have to be kind of cognizant about, you know, the changing landscape. You know, what does that look like? How does it work within your organization? Being very clear, you know, some are scaling back, some are, you know, maintaining at a deficit in some ways. We have a nonprofit hospital, community hospital that their CEO is just like, we lost our grant, but we're not terminating anybody, we're not laying anybody off, we're just gonna suck it up and pay them and continue our services that we were doing. And we're gonna sue, and we're gonna hope to get an outcome on the other end, but they're taking that as a personal piece to engage and keep the staff they have. And that's huge. I was like, wow, you know, we've never laid off. We have different stipulations of different things. We're not huge grant funding, but we have equal one side of the house to equal the other side. We're a billionaire type market in the sense of anyone that you can think of, we've engaged, especially during COVID, we've engaged within our campus, and I treat them all the same. I know who people are, but you know, it's a business, and patient is a patient to me. So You know, yes, I may despise certain aspects of who you are, but
You won't know it.
but they don't know it, you know, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're here to help. And maybe at some point, maybe you'll change the dynamic. Maybe you'll start a conversation and they'll say, wow, Daniela was really amazing to me, and I hadn't really thought. Good, maybe you now are thinking. I don't know, maybe that is. They meet Joanne, and it's like Jersey, and they're like, you know, she'll tell her story. And she's got an amazing backstory, you know? So it's like, if they take a moment to actually hear that, you just don't know what that is going to spawn into. Some may not be at all. It may foster exactly who they are. That's great, you cross them off the list and move on. You know, so for you, what is some of the things, everybody's going through change right now. Are there things that have just dramatically changed for you and that you'd be like, wow, we're not sure how we can do this event, we're not sure how we can handle this service. Is there anything going on? Anybody? Good, you're all status quo? Loving.
I mean, the environment's unpredictable, right?
Well, right.
Like, every day you're wondering, you know, what's gonna happen, you know, in terms of not just funding, but like in terms of rights, in terms of safety, and you know,
Right.
I mean, it's an unpredictable, constantly changing landscape we're in. So it just feels like everything's changing all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's difficult to plan because of just the level of chaos.
Yeah. It is a chaos, it's safety, it's many other things that we never had to worry, well, we've
Right.
always had to worry about, but we've never had to
It's just we
visibly
thought we
worry
were
about.
past.
Yeah, we thought we were
Right.
kind of past some of it. We've gone through that recently. I mean, we're a hospital, so, you know, I mean, everybody wants to stay off the radar a little bit with this administration, with a lot of the state stuff, with everything, and depending on what state you're from, you know, you want to stay off the radar with certain names and certain things. So DEI goes away, you know, gender affirming goes away. Does it mean the actual services go away? No, we have a gender affirming voice activation, physical therapy and occupational therapy group. And that group works with that community, and they help whoever it is, an individual one-on-one or as a class setting on the 6-week kind of cycle. And I said, well, you can't use that in the flyer anymore. However, why not you can just say voice activation. You know, you find everybody's finding new ways to do exactly what we've been doing, not canceling the services, but finding the way that it doesn't populate something that gets anxious people in your community to yell and scream, that gets grant people to say, you know, there's different aspects of how to make some of that
And
work.
I think it depends, right? Like you're
Yeah.
a large hospital system.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm a CDO.
Correct.
I'm not doing shit different.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be louder. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be prouder, and I want you to come for me,
Right.
right? Because I'm gonna turn that opportunity into press, donations, and everything else, right?
Right.
So like I take a very different, and my foundation's like that. I just had a meeting with the president of a foundation this is now our second year getting money from them. They're new, and she said, everyone else is being quiet and you're not.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Right.
So, and she valued that.
Right.
You know, so unless, you know, I have to, and there's legal reasons, you know,
Yeah.
it could change.
Yeah, and I'm gonna piggyback off that. Like, I think that, first of all, it's one of the things that, I mean, you know Joanne, it's one of the reasons I love her, because she's like, no, we're gonna stick to our values. You know, after January, there were so many meetings that we all jumped on, you know, like nationally, and there were many of the things that were suggested was, you know, tone down your language, alter some of the language on your website. And
Yeah.
Joanne and Ciara were like, nope, we're staying
Yeah.
true to who we are.
Right.
But so in terms of this, right, how has that changed for me in terms of like engagement and sponsors and donors? So what I've noticed is because we've continued to stay true to our values, we've had more people attend our pride events.
Yeah.
We've had more people attend and
Right.
buy a ticket to our drag queen bingo,
Yep.
right? So I've noticed an increase. I've seen more churches reaching out to us, wanting to support us in some way, right? You know, an influx of people wanting to volunteer because it is their way of like fighting back and pushing
Right.
back against it. So, I mean, although what is happening in our landscape nationally is like freaking scary,
Yeah.
I have seen a positive in terms of like engagement for us.
Right, and I think we see that a lot in a lot of different scenarios. I mean, some, you lost money, so you have to trim, you have to do whatever. But do you just trim and they go? Well, no, you still have that connection. Maybe it's in. Maybe, yes, you lost the funding, and yes, you can't pay their salaries. But I have an organization for Medicare and high cap, and they're volunteers, and now they're doing exactly what they've been doing, but she's volunteering her time, to make some of these things happen, because that's, her passion, and she's hopeful that it will change and things will come back to a little bit normalcy. But she understands it may not. But, you're still holding up to your, so we're getting close. But, and many of you are doing this already. So, it's really talking about, meeting with your teams in whatever capacity. Everybody's time constrained. There's a lot of events going on, a lot of different things you're doing, and there's lead up and there's crossover. I always just have to say, if you have done some of the quarterly, ongoing little outreach, you're going out to lunch, well, go to that restaurant, go to something else, at least say hello to the person, have a drink, have a soda, have something at some of these things for dining out. Then when you come to ask to re-sign up in a time where business is slowed, things are down, like for us, we're not getting our Canadians, so yeah, they're struggling. But they still want to be committed because it's like, oh yeah, see Joanne, you're always in here, you're always saying hello, you brought me this cute little whatever item for her staff. It's that simple. If you don't have that and you've only reached out to them, 30 days before your event, it's kind of like, oh, you don't even think of me. You're not thinking of who I am as an organization and as a partner. And that's my piece. If you treat people 365 like they're your partner in whatever range, and you can do your spreadsheet. There's data people in this room right now that will look at that and go, just like things. It's like, we'll touch them a couple times, we'll touch them 5 times. Ooh, this one we got to do like monthly. We'll tell our staff, everybody go out. Somebody go out and do that. Because that was one of our back things that we had for dining out this year. We had a few key restaurants that felt they'd been there since the beginning, they didn't feel for whatever, and they were busy, they didn't see emails, they didn't whatever. But, once someone reached out to them, they're like, oh, of course we love you. And then they always participate. But they had just felt like, oh, I hadn't seen anyone. So it's just, it doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You just have to kind of go in.
Yeah.
And even just stop by. It's like, oh, I was just walking by and I just saw the owner. It's like, hey, how you doing? And whatever it is.
It's so easy. We have I don't know if anyone follows women's soccer, but I do. Gotham Sports. So they play in Jersey. They gave us free tickets to their game multiple times. We just put together an Edge swag little basket and announced
It's like a PR box.
Like a PR
like
box.
unboxing on TikTok.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like now my relationship with them. I'm gonna be at their Pride game. There's 3,000 lesbians. Like this is a whole audience I never would have got at before.
That's
Right.
Joanne's dream, by the way.
Right?
But I think it's like that giving to them as well.
Yeah.
And it could be so simple as just that. No one does that. Like so many people don't do that. They take the tickets and they're like, okay, thanks, that was wonderful. Maybe they send them an email.
Yeah.
But they're gonna open it up, they're gonna touch those things, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh Edge, oh yeah, I've got that thing on there. Of course they're gonna have to take
Right,
it.
and it doesn't have to be expensive things. The stuff you already have on the shelf. It's stuff
Right.
like, I got 50,000 items for the year. It's
Literally
like,
leftover.
they're just leftovers. There's other departments that have leftovers. One that came up recently was, we had a restaurant that is new. And it's tough when they're new and they haven't even got there. They're not even sure of their ROI, not even sure of their audience base yet completely. But I said it's a great outside. It's called Play Lounge, and it's a great outside space. So I approached the LGBT Center, one of our partners, and I said, "Do you have any groups?" Yes, people are getting tired of meeting sometimes within the 4 walls, especially with very specific groups. They're like, "Yeah, our youth, and our trans youth and other youth don't want to come in to an HIV center, into an LGBT center, because they're not sure where they fit in that." And it's like, oh, they're always in here, and then there's this older group next door, and they don't feel that they're seen. Great, well, maybe you take your group somewhere else. So now they're taking their group every couple of weeks to Play Lounge, and they meet there. And they're working with the high school to bring in that group, their LGBT, or whatever they're naming it now, their group within the school, to meet them there so the youth feel safe. They're in an environment which is kind of open and fun and safe, and it's not 4 walls, and it's not a medical center, and it's not the typical that they're like, I'm just not sure. You know, I've been there. I was there. I was like, oh, I'm not going into that. You know, it's like,
What is Play Lounge? I thought it was a sex club.
well, there are those that are called
Like,
that.
you didn't go to a sex club?
This one is like social play lounge, but it is a fabulous coffee, and they just changed ownerships and friends own it, but
It's like a
the most
coffee-
fantastic view of the mountain, Drake
Games.
shows.
It's board
Oh.
games, yeah.
Board games.
Yeah, board games and every possible. Do not go in when they have the mahjong tournament unless you play mahjong, because those women and men, they will cut you. You cannot order, they don't whatever, they're very serious.
Chinese.
Yeah.
This is the second time I heard that.
Oh yeah. It's
I
like,
didn't know
you
what
know.
that was either.
So when I say it's pros and sides, you know, it's staff engagement internally. You know, foster that cross connection. And Joanne had said this. How do you refer to it? Your mission, or you start your?
We do mission moments at our staff meeting. I love it.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that really quick, because that
Okay.
just
so,
what that means.
So really quick, because I know y'all want to get out of here. We do it at our staff meeting once a month. We do a mission moment. Actually, we do twice a month. We have staff meeting twice a month, and we just give our staff the opportunity to talk about something they did that reignited the mission of the work we're doing for them. And it's everybody. It's front desk. It's the driver.
Yeah.
It's across everyone, and it's like amazing because they're proud of their work. They're proud of having that moment. They get to share it with their peers, you know, and it has fueled this like. People they're serious about it now. They come prepared with their mission moment, like, so it's been a really good way, like across departments, for people to talk about their successes of bringing our mission to life and what that has meant and looked like for them. So.
Right. I'll give an example. When I was at DAP, they used to have, it was smaller, so you'd have everybody in a conference room, and I mean, still 50 to 100 people, but they would have, help me out here, it's like they would have almost a performance, you know, one or two people would have to do, or teams would do kind of a performance or a music track or just, you know, lip sync and kind of thing. So one of the guys was a driver, we have a resale store, or DAP does, Revivals, and he was a driver for that. And he shows up, and he's a young guy, and all of a sudden he gets up and he belts out this amazing, like Frank Sinatra, this like Michael Bublé, like what the heck? And everybody's just like awestruck. Well, go forward. I'm bringing Dining Out for Life, the conference, to Palm Springs. Wrong month, it's not middle of summer, but that all aside, as Joanne knows. And I hired him as his first contract, $500, will you come in and do a set at dinner? Well, what does he do now? His whole career is singing at clubs and nightclubs, restaurants, his whole thing. He's not a driver. Him and his wife are now, he is performing everywhere within our market for different charities, different things. And it was his breakout. And he always says, that was my first paid gig. He was so scared and excited at the same time. But he had this audience that was so supportive. And he was, you know, a very good looking man. So everybody, you know, he was working it. He worked this audience. You know, but it's like you never know where those connections are going to go. We're literally a minute. Final thoughts. Anyone? I know we're getting close, but I'm around, we're around. Any thoughts from anybody that has things? CJ, I've worked with you forever. Come on, you're in the back with coffee. I know you're caffeinated now. Any thoughts?
No comment, except with retention of staff, unlearn management and relearn how to be a human.
Thank
Connect with
you.
People,
Thank you.
find out what inspires them, see how
Yes.
to get recognition, just get to know people. That will drive everything else you're working on, from data, projects,
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and that is a very true case. You know, we've talked about that at length, and it's like we all have education in different aspects. We all are on a path of whatever that looks like, or you're going for your master's, your PhD, different aspects within the organizational structure. If you live within that, I don't live by boxes. So if you have framework around you, and I had this conversation, I think, with Kaiser last, I don't live within a box, and not with him specifically, but I just said, you know, I try to break down those barriers to be able to find out what comes in. You never know what that comment, what that dialogue, what that interpersonal connectivity is going to be. Mm-hmm. Some may not be anything. Some may be your future husband or wife or partner. Some may, which I've had happen. So you just never know what that is going to be, you know, and, you know. So with that, any final thoughts? Nothing from me. This is the contact. Hopefully that QR code works, as I did that last night. It should. Or go to the right side. I should put it that way. I believe it should. But otherwise, so take, you have another day or so, or the rest of the day today. Find someone you haven't talked to. Find someone that just says, and I always ask the question, it's like, what brought you here? Yes, your company is paying for you to be here, or your organization, but what brought you personally here? What in the last 48 hours or more have you learned about anything? And we're going to have a lot of different stories. People went last night, people who went out the night before. There's connectivity that over the last 16 years, my friends, Joanne and I, well, one, we share the same birthday. She's my lioness. So, or Leos, as you can tell. So we'll always have that, and we will always be, regardless of what I'm doing in my life, she will be part of it. CJ, who I met when I first joined at DAP, he came on social work, wasn't it, or case management? Yeah. And now he's a leader in the organization. And so now we went from fun and games and things and just patient to now strategy and leadership and discussing what the future looks like of Amplify and many other things. And there's other, many individuals within this network, and I say that again, network within Amplify, and that's the whole purpose of what this is you just never know what that next connectivity piece will be. And don't shortchange it. There's many different aspects of this week for people who have different connectivity points. Use it to your benefit, and whatever that is, don't shy away from it, be open about it, say, what was that conversation, and go forth and love your business that you're in. And I applaud you all for working in this industry, because as a man 64 years old and living in, HIV and different things, I exist for the fact of where you're all going. There's not anybody in here, I don't think, that's older than me. No.
We're not pointing anything out. We're not.
Only because I've known Beth since day one of my, career. All right, with that in mind, let's go on to the next.
Thank you.